Once upon a time, there was a little engine called Edward. He lived in a shed with 5 other engines. In 1942, a small boy named Christopher caught measles. While he was ill, his father made up stories to amuse him, basing the first on a child's rhyme he remembered. Early in the morning, down by the station, see the little engines all in a row. Along came the driver, pulls the little lever, beep, beep, chuff, chuff, off we go. This became Edward's day out, and 2 others followed. One about Henry, the big green engine, and one about Gordon, the big blue express engine. These were not at first written down, and the small boy became, as he thought, so familiar with them that he began to criticize when he thought his father was going wrong. So his father, who is, of course, the Reverend W. Awdry, jotted the stories down on the back of old circulators so that he could be sure of telling the same version every time. When Christopher got better, his father made him some toy engines. There was one like Edward, and another painted blue and with 6 small wheels had a number 1 on its side. "What can we call it?" asked Christopher. "How about Thomas the Tank Engine?" replied his father. So Thomas it became, and Christopher had a great deal of fun playing with it. Yet after a while it was not quite enough. "Tell me some stories about Thomas," he demanded. His father made up 4 stories and drew some pictures in pencil. These went down well too, and Christopher's mother thought the stories were too good to waste. At last, through a distant cousin, a retired businessman named Edmund Ward was found. He said he would be willing to publish the first 3 stories if the Reverend Awdry could write a 4th to get Henry out of his tunnel and provide a happy ending. So the stories about Edward, Gordon, and Henry became part of the 3 railway engines, which was published almost exactly 50 years ago in May 1945. When the book sold well, the publisher asked for more stories. The ones about Thomas were sent to him, and he published them as Thomas the Tank Engine in 1946. Between 1948 and 1972, a new book in the series was published each year, and this has also continued from 1983 to the present day through the pen of Christopher, the small boy for whom the character of Thomas was created back in 1943. In 1979, television producer Britt Allcroft met with the Reverend Awdry. Her series, Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends, was launched on UK television in 1984 and turned Thomas into a television star. He is now a favorite with children and their parents all the world over. The 39th title in the railway series, The Fat Controller's Engines, is due to be published in August 1995. Christopher Awdry, The Britt Allcroft Company. Thomas's Isle Dream. After a busy day, Thomas the Tank Engine returned to the shed to find the Fat Controller waiting for him. He told the little blue engine that he had received a letter from his friend Caledonia, who lived on the Isle of Mann. Although he had heard a lot about the island, Thomas had never been able to visit his friend because his wheels were too wide for the narrow track. Caledonia was very excited and wanted to tell Thomas that he had been to the top of Snæfell, which was the island's highest mountain. He told Thomas that normally only trams went to the top. Number 1 tram and her friends had been doing this for 100 years, and as part of their birthday celebrations, an extra rail had been laid to the top to allow Caledonia to go to the top of Snæfell. Thomas was very tired after a hard day's work, and after the fat controller had finished reading the letter, drifted off into a deep sleep. He started to dream that he and his friend Bertie the bus were invited to the island, and a special track had been laid to allow him to visit his friend. In his dream, Thomas and Bertie had to travel across the sea to the island in a large ship. At the port of Douglas, they had to be carefully lifted off by a huge steam crane. A special line had been laid to the pier so that Thomas could join his friend at Douglas Station. He arrived just as Maitland was leaving for Port Erin with some important post. Thomas whistled his goodbye and remembered the times he had pulled the post train on Sodor. Then he dreamt that he went to Port Erin himself. He and his crew enjoyed the climb to Crystal, and the view of the sea below, with the waves breaking through the rocks, was magnificent. Then the line curved inland and took them through Crockaglen. In front of them, everywhere was blue, and Thomas thought he was heading straight for the ocean. He waited for the splash, then realized it was not the sea at all. It was just hundreds and hundreds of bluebells all around them. At Balasala, he had to wait for the morning passenger train to pass. This time it was Hutch pulling the coaches, and Thomas smiled and blew his whistle as he passed him at the level crossing. Bertie was also out and about, waiting at the crossing on his way to Port Erin, and tooted his horn in welcome. Thomas dreamt on. He was now at Port Erin on a holiday, not having to pull any coaches or any troublesome trucks to play naughty tricks on him. He was able to stand in the sun outside the station and watch the little girls and boys going to the seaside. Suddenly the peace was shattered by the rumble of a diesel engine as Viking came into the station. Thomas did not know this newcomer, but it didn't take them long for them to become friends. Viking was on holiday too, and had come all the way from Germany. He told Thomas that he was going to Laxey to see a special post train go to the top of Snæfell. Thomas asked if he could go as well, and Viking promised to show him the way. Thomas dreamt that he woke early the next day, but when he came out of the shed, he saw that it was raining and very cold. He and Viking set off for Laxey, and on the way they could see the snow on the summit of Snæfell Mountain. When they got to Laxey, the station master looked very glum. Number 1, he explained, had tried to get to the top of the mountain but could not make it. A civil aviation rail car had also tried, but his wheels kept slipping. They even sent for Caledonia, but he was having his brakes mended and was unable to work that day. Thomas told the station master that he thought he might be able to help clear the way with his snowplow, then the rail car could get to the summit. Thomas's driver and fireman got up a good head of steam and set off, followed by the rail car and number 1 tram. Near the top, Thomas nearly got stuck in a deep drift, but he struggled valiantly through. The rail car followed, and the post reached the summit of Snæfell. The next day, as a thank you for helping out, Caledonia came out to Laxey to show Thomas the big wheel that was used to pump water from the mines. Thomas was pleased to be able to help, and the engines were in high spirits. They found some double track at Laxey and decided to have a race back to Douglas. But just as they started, a bright light appeared in front of Thomas, and the doors of the engine shed on Sodor were thrown open. There stood the fat controller looking sternly at his pocket watch. "Thomas," he said, "you should be at work." Although Thomas had not really visited the Isle of Mann, he was happy all the same because he had been able to see all the wonderful places in his dream.